Okay, hello everybody. So this talk, so Tim Banks initially was going to do a talk on Drupal for usability for Drupal devs. Tim had to pull out, unfortunately, at the beginning of the week, couldn't make it. So I decided to step in and sort of throw some slides together and just show some of the stuff I've been hacking on recently. So yeah, 2 days notice, putting this talk together. So be gentle. So yeah, we're going to have some fun with Drupal 8, with some PHP libraries and the Drupal.org API. So some stuff about me. There's my cursor. There we go. So yeah, my name's Ollie. I'm a senior developer at Microserve in Bristol. And then I guess the other thing for this is open source project maintainer. So I do contribute quite a lot to open source, including various Drupal modules, Drupal core, and some other stuff. So a lot of stuff on GitHub. Some of which we'll be looking at right now. And this is going to be a little bit of a Drupal 8 crash course. So if anyone's new to Drupal 8, this is some of the stuff that we're going to be covering. So PHP libraries as a separate thing. Some unit testing in there, a little bit of Composer, routing, services, dependency injection, and caching. So lots of good fun stuff there. So are we ready? Yes, live demo alert. I have a few slides, but most of this is going to be demo. So, did you know that Drupal.org is an API? So, we're all aware of Drupal.org. It's where we go to download modules to find out latest stuff on core, where we publish this event, where you register for this event. But Drupal.org has a public API that we can use to query to get data from it. So, I'm not sure how many people know about this. I knew a little bit. I used to work for the Drupal Association on Drupal.org, so I knew about it. I'm not sure in the wider community how people know that this exists. So one of the first things I started writing was a PHP library for the Drupal.org API. It allows you to retrieve node data and user data currently from the website via the API, filter them by properties, so user IDs, usernames, project IDs, project types, etc., etc. Library provides its own entity classes, which we'll see in a minute, and methods for retrieving common properties. So for nodes, I've got methods, things like get title, get type, get username for users, that type of thing. One of the big things is this is reusable. So because this code is not within Drupal, this code is within a separate standalone PHP library. Does everybody sort of understand what I mean by a PHP library specifically rather than something else? Cool. Initially, both these examples are done using Drupal 8. One of them actually may be Symfony eventually, but my little hacky prototype is I've done in Drupal 8. But because this code is being separated, I can easily plug it into whatever system I want to. So the business logic, per se, in Drupal is very minimal, but all the magic happens in a separate reusable place. And also it's all unit tested, so I don't need to worry about testing the API integration in my site code because I've already done that somewhere else. And we can pull this in with Composer. It's under my Open Davis namespace and it's requiring the Drupal.org API PHP package. So let's have a look at that. This is it. So it's on GitHub already. That's what it says. PHP library for the Drupal.org API. Provides creating the wrapper functions for Drupal.org. This API is documented here. So this is the page on Drupal.org that outlines what it does. So it documents everything, what we can get. So currently the library does a very sort of small subsection of this, just enough that I've needed to use to sort of fulfill my own needs and scratch my own itch, I guess. We can do more with it. And yeah, currently it's querying nodes, specifically for projects, which we'll see in a minute, and also users. So I can specify one or more node IDs, get a new node query, pass those node IDs into the query here. We can specify the type of node we want to return. So within the node class, there's some constants in there for which type we want to use. And we can execute that. And then likewise for users, we can specify some user IDs. So Dries being number 1, and then 381, 388 being me. Again, pass that to a user query, set the options again, and then get the results back out. So, I'll open this in PHP store and we can see a little bit more what it does. This one. So, yeah, these are the examples I just saw. Also got my list of things I'm wanting to show. Make sure I go through everything. Yeah, so I guess the first thing I'll mention is the test.php file. So this is what I've been using just to sort of stub everything out. And we can see that I can just specify, in this case, my own user ID. I can run PHP test PHP. Make this a little bit bigger. And this is actually going to go to the API, get that data back. So this is me on Drupal.org right here. So that's pretty cool. But we also do have separate unit tests. So in some places I've mocked out various parts of the API. I've got some fake node queries and some fake user queries. Because I don't want to be testing, I want to run these tests a lot. Like ideally, well, they do every time I do a push. But also I want to run them locally as I'm developing new features. And to do that, I don't want to be hitting the actual API every time, because I don't want to get sort of rate limited or blocked or anything like that. But also I want it to run quickly, so I don't want to have that latency time from my laptop to Drupal.org in, I was going to say in Portland, Oregon, but it's Fastly now, so probably not as far as Oregon. So yeah, we want to fake this stuff out and make it run as quick as we can. So also going to run the PHP unit. We can see very quickly that we've got 5 tests and 10 assertions, and these all pass, so we're in a good place. Let's have a little look at some of these things. So, in the examples, we have, say, node query, so the node query extends a generic query class. Actually, let's have a look at that first. Query. So let's make it smaller again. There we go. So this is, I guess, where most of the magic stuff is happening. We're actually wrapping up everything. So this is our base UI for Drupal.org. Let's make that go away as well. So this is the constant UI that we're going to hit. We're going to set it to some properties. I can get options back out. I can get URI. So, and also set options. So these are when I'm specifying what are the user IDs, what are the node IDs, what are the types. You set options for that. We're going to return this every time, so it's chainable, as we've seen. And yeah, this is where the magic is happening. So this is where we're actually getting a response back from the API, or making the request and then getting the response back. So we can use this URI, which we saw above, and then pass it through our options that we've already set. We're going to check the status code, so it should always be a 200 if it's okay. If it's not, something's gone wrong, we'll throw this exception. So this should look very familiar. Anybody's used Guzzle, essentially, to make HTTP requests, or in fact use the HTTP client in Drupal 8, this should look fairly familiar to everybody. So it's just wrap around Guzzle, essentially. So we get the contents back. We're going to use the collect method. So any Laravel people in the room, any of you doing stuff with Laravel, Tom I know has. Laravel people should be familiar with collect. So it is pulling in a library that a company called Titan have abstracted out of Laravel for collections. So an object-oriented way of dealing with arrays and array functions, which I'm quite a fan of. I've got a separate talk on that. But in this case, I'm just going to use it to wrap around the contents. And just, yeah, some getters and setters in there. So that's where the main part of the query is happening. Main part, like, the only difference for a node query is setting the URI. So we're going to hit the node.json endpoint for a node, and then likewise for user query, we're going to go to user.json. So if you want to add another one here, then it's very minimal, just setting the URI, and that's all we're doing. What else are we doing? So yeah, we are stubbing these out technically. In the tests, so we've got a fake node query that extends the real node query, and rather than actually making a request to the API, we're able to mock that and just return just a new response, set some nodes manually, and then return those. So we're just faking this request. So likewise for users, do exactly the same thing. Just making our own response rather than Guzzle giving it to us and then setting our own users. And what we're then using in, let's have a go project test. So I've got this one as testing projects. Let's go and have a look at set a method initially. So rather than using the real query, we're going to use a fake one that we just saw. I'm going to define some nodes that I want to be returned. We're going to execute the query, so execute in inverted commas, get the contents back out, and then return a project entity from within the API. And this is where we're setting the nodes. So rather than, again, Drupal actually giving us nodes, I'm telling it what to return here already. So we're just going to return back some standard classes. Just making a node ID of 1 with a title, project A, and setting the downloads and the stars fields. That's what I'm doing there, and then likewise for project 2, and that's what and project 3 actually as well. And then user 2 users doing essentially the same thing, stubbing out some users to return back, so myself and Dries, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I think that's about it. So again, so this is dealing with all the interaction between at the API level. So we don't need to this all encapsulated within this. We know this works. We can pull this into any project, whether it's Drupal 7, Drupal 8, Symfony, Laravel, whatever. Cool. Is there anything else in here we need to do? Run tests, we've done that. Yeah, and I guess that's the only thing to sort of notice is some of this code might look a bit sort of interesting or different to people. If you're used to using just purely Drupal, you'll sort of notice that we've got braces on different lines and various things. So this isn't, again, Drupal code. This is a separate PHP library. It is to the PSR2 coding standard rather than the Drupal coding standard. So just thought it was worth highlighting that. Cool. So this is sort of the building block of the more fun stuff. So now I had this working, what could I do with it? This was sort of the idea, was to try and find a good way of promoting our open source stuff on our new website that we're currently sort of building. So this sort of was inspired by Sparty. So Sparty are, again, I'm doing all the Laravel thing today. Sparty are a specialist Laravel agency based in Belgium, I'm not sure if that's right. But they are very big on their open source and contribute a lot to open source, as we can sort of see on, let's just jump back over here. There we go. This is Sparty's website. So it's a big sort of marketing thing for them, I guess, and good for this sort of ethos and brand, really, to contribute a lot of this stuff back. You can see a whole list of all these Laravel packages that they've contributed, and the number of download counts, and a little bit about what each sort of library does. And they spend this time maintaining these separate libraries, but then they can reuse them across multiple projects and then not have to reinvent the wheel every time. So I can just keep scrolling. There's quite a lot of them. And it's not just Laravel, they've also got some PHP libraries, so again, I use some of these in different projects as well. Anyway, you get that in. So I tend to try and take a contribution first approach as well when I'm doing my code. So if I can sort of see some functionality that I can reuse or open source, I will try and do that and then write the client sort of specific stuff separately. So I was trying to find a way of promoting that in a similar sort of way. Downloads we can do, but Drupal also has stars. So you can, if you're logged in, you can start projects. Just so if I find one, override node options. Just have a look at one that I maintain. I think it's fairly recent this was added actually, so not there. So there's a little start button here. So this would, thought would be quite nice to pull that in. And then what I've done is written a Drupal 8 module that is built on top of the API we've already seen. And there's not a way to say, hey, I'm Microserve, show me the whole list of projects that we support. So again, let's have a look at this, Drupal Microserve. So on our page, or in fact on every organization page, you see a list of the projects that we support. So i.e. the modules and themes that we contribute to. And down here, so we've got this list here. But there's not a way from the API to say, I'm Microserve, give me this list of projects. So what I've had to do is find a way of specifying which projects to download. So the way I'm doing that is by specifying the node IDs of the projects on Drupal.org, which we'll see. and there's an admin form to do that. So previously I was doing it in just a test PHP file. The Drupal sort of layer then introduces the form where you can specify the actual projects to get. I'll see that in a minute. This queries the API, displays the project information, so the download count, number of stars, the title, the URL, adding the maintainer and some other stuff in there. And once it gets that data, it caches it locally. So again, we only hit the API when we need to. So I did this once a day. Let's go too far ahead again. So let's have a look at that. Where's PHP store done? There it is. So have this open. Yes, we do. So this is my Microsoft projects module. Yep, we can see that. Awesome. And what we'll see is like this is fairly minimal now. So all that logic, there's no logic here about the actual API really, because that's all handled in the library. What we do have, just have a look at what's going to show you the page. What I can do actually is find the site. That'd be a good thing to do. There we go. So this is the Drupal 8 site. I've been hacking on for this thing. I can go to projects, and we see a list of projects. So these are the ones that I've specified in this case. These are mostly the ones that I maintain. So Node Options, which has 231,000 downloads. Awesome. Use it if you don't already. It's pretty cool. Yeah, Copyright Block and some of the sort of smaller ones, and then Simple Integrations is one that we released this week. So we can see this working. And probably got slightly off script, but let's just do it this way as well. Okay, whilst that's logging in. So projects. Okay, so routing. So for those who are not familiar with Drupal 8, all routing is done in YAML files in Drupal 8. So we're sort of looking hook menu equivalent in Drupal 8. If you used to do Symfony, it's probably will look familiar that way. So we specify the path, which is /projects, specify the permission in order to access that page, and then we give it the path to a controller class and the method to call. So in this case, it's obviously within the MS projects module, it's within the controller directory, and then it's called project controller. We can see this within source directory, controller, project controller. And if we just go back quickly, we'll see at the end a double colon, and then index. So index is the name of the method to call within the controller. Let's see that. So first thing it does, it gets the project IDs out of the configuration. So we'll see where that goes in a minute. Some nice regular expression that either separates them, if either do them on a new line or comma separate them, splits those out. Uses a project retriever, I think, within a module. We can set the project ID and then get the project. So this is the API interaction. This is the Drupal module being wrapped around the API at this point. And then we're going to sort them by downloads. I've got a typo here somewhere. What should be there? There we go. Sort them by downloads and then map over them again. So in this case, there's no theme integration here at all. So all I'm doing in this case is just mapping over them, sorting them, and then in this case, just giving me a string for each one, which is what we saw already. This is more Laravel collections again, so we'll sort of see collect in here. And then what we can do is start chaining these methods together, so we can map over them, then sort them, then map them again, then reset the values, then get them all back out. So, pretty cool. Then we've got like Drupal standard render array at the end. So we're going to use the theme item list, so it's just very Drupal 7 still, and then specify some projects. So once it's got it from the API, store it. Where is it? Don't want to go to that. So admin config. Remember what the URL is now. So I haven't put the links in yet. Let's find out my routing file. So it's a separate route for the admin page. That's out the code at the end, of course. So this is the admin form. So this is where I specify the IDs, and then that's when you get it back. It's stored in the configuration, and then we just saw it come back out of the configuration. So what we can do in this case is go back to projects again. We can see these. Let's have a look what can show. Code options is mine, which is something else we've done today. Simple email templates. Hot off the press, new Microsoft Drupal module. And what I can do is edit this and then get the node ID from the URL. So 111.1417. Let's put it on a new line in this case. So now if we go to this page, we should have another one. There we go. So nice and easy. We don't have to, the modules handle all the API interactions behind the scenes. As far as the Drupal editor needs to know, all we've got to do is add another ID to a form, which is pretty awesome. We can see the sorted by downloads as per the thing. Let's see. So that's pretty cool. Let's have a look at the project retriever. Let's have a look at the form code actually. So yeah, so the form code is what we just saw. So that we've got a text area. We're going to set the default values. We're going to get the items back out of the config if they're there. Put our description in. And down here, we're going to just store it in the config, so it's all within this MS project settings config object and store its project IDs. And let's have a look at the project retriever. So this is where we're interacting with the API. So some dependency injection stuff going on. We'll talk about that in a minute. Get projects. So this is where the main part of this is happening. So what we're going to do first is check, is this project in the cache? So they are stored in the cache. Let's see that. Actually, there we go. So when it gets the items for each project, we store it in this custom cache table. We use the node ID as the cached ID. We store the whole standard class object with the data, and then it expires at midnight tonight. So if I refresh this page now so many times, it will just use the one in the cache until it hits midnight or 1 minute past midnight tonight. Then it will just get the new version. So if it's in the cache, it's going to get it. If it's not, then we're going to use the node query class, set the options, get the node IDs, and specify the type. So see that in this project class. I didn't show this before. Or we've got here some constants. So these are basically mapping the node types on Drupal.org to constants, so they're really easy to figure out fields. So cool. Execute the query, get the results, and then do cache set. So store the items in the cache if we've got them. So the next time we don't leave them. Create a new project and then return back an array. So we're going to want to get the title, number of downloads, number of stars, and then the URL to the project. Get the first one back. That's the back. So pretty cool. What else do we want to show here? Yeah, we've got some dependency injection stuff going on. So project retriever. Let's see, so our cache bucket. So we've got a project retriever as a service. So each module has its own services file where we can specify service classes to reuse. The one we saw in the code is called project retriever because it's retrieving the project data from the API. We're going to inject, this is the class we're going to use, and then we're going to inject the MS project cache service. And all that is a different cache bin which creates that table. And this is defined up here. So give it the name, specify the cache interface as a standard, give it a name, and this is the same, tag it as a cache bin. That's all that's doing. Then because we're using the arguments key in here, then gets passed into the construct method within the service class. We store it as the cache property, which is up here. Here we go, this cache backend interface, and then it's used this cache right down here. So a little bit of dependency injection going on, which is pretty cool. And then likewise, I think we have it in here as well. So a slightly different way of doing dependency injection and services, the way you get them within controllers and plugins. So in this case, we're going to implement a form project base class for a configuration form, and we're injecting configuration factor in this case actually. So this is where we get our configuration. We're overriding a create method. So that's saying rather than Drupal figure out how to create this class, we're going to tell it how to do it. So we can return a new version of the same class and inject what we want to inject from the container. So that's pretty cool. What else do we need to show in here? Settings form, it's fine. That's all the module we've done. Awesome. So the Drupal code for this is pretty minimal. All we've got is just a wrap around our API, and it doesn't even know how to actually interact with the API at all, because that's all done in the module. And again, if you wanted to add another one, let's do the project. If you want to add another one, we can just add another project ID into the configuration form. So that was pretty awesome. So that was cool. I was quite happy with so far how that one's worked out. Where are we going? And yeah, I think so. At the moment, this is sort of like more sort of MVP type of sort of approach, and yeah, I think there's some more actual Drupal integration to do. So like adding theme hooks and not returning a string for everyone and put it into a list. It would be pretty cool to actually have a theme to actually build like a proper page out of what Sparty has. But I think for a few hours worth of work to get that integration working, that's pretty cool. So that sort of gives our node endpoint a good use case, and then I've started thinking about what we can do by using users. I'm fairly sure I saw something that did this or something very similar to it, and now I can't find it again anyway. But I thought it was pretty cool to do as a little demo anyway. So the other thing one thing I always see on Twitter and on various places is when I've always missed my Drupalversary. So when did I sign up for Drupal.org? And yeah, so when did it register on Drupal? And let's see, so obviously if you go to any user profile on here, it stores the history. Yeah, so obviously you've got the number of years, number of months since you signed up registered for an account. This is quite vague, and you can't really tell when it is. And I can, because I'm a webmaster, but hey, so most people probably can't tell exactly when your sort of 10-year thing is coming up or anything like that. So we can get it from the API. So what I decided to do is make sort of Drupalversaries as a service and build a little sort of site for it, even if one already exists, or maybe it doesn't. I can't remember. So in this case, we're going to again use the API to do all the API library to do the integration, to deal with the integration. And we've got another Drupal 8 module. So this, in fact, might be the one I actually end up doing in Symfony 4, but for now, doing a prototype in Drupal worked quite well. So we're going to enter a username. We're going to again query the API using a user query this time, and we're going to display some information. So the information we're going to get is the person's next Drupalversary date, the number of days until the Drupalversary date, and then also the number of years that will be on the site. Once again, we're retrieving the cache data locally. At the moment, it's doing another sort of times that expires at midnight cache. But actually, what would be pretty cool, I think the create date isn't going to change. So what could eventually happen, or the next step for this, I think, would be to store an actual entity in Drupal itself, and then never have to query the API for this user again, because again, the create date's not going to change. Which maybe it's actually might end up doing it simply instead. So let's have a look at that one. Let's close some of these down. Too many to do. So when is my Drupalversary? And Drupalversary is a service. So this was pretty straightforward. So we've got a form. I can put in my username. I can put a search. Takes me to a page. Very Drupal.org-ish. Just /u/my username. When is my Drupalversary? My Drupalversary is on October the 19th. It's going to be 10 years this year, which is pretty cool. And I know it's 185 days until my next Drupalversary. So it's fine. You can put anybody else's ones in here. That's like Dries. So Dries has already been this year. It was back in March. Dries is 18 years on Drupal.org, not surprisingly. And yeah, 348 days. So to be picking one sort of before and after now, this time of year, just to check this is all sort of working. Who else can we pick? Black Big Tom. How's Tom doing? Yeah, Tom's is in end of June. Seven years for Tom. 70 to go. Days to go to Tom. Let's pick something else. Who can we pick in here? Yeah, so Nick as well. This is quite fun. I'm quite enjoying it. So there we go. Yeah, it makes it in October as well. So this is pretty cool. So yeah, again, we're storing into cache, Drupalversary cache, so we can get each one that's stored prefixed with name, name. Again, we store the data in here. It actually expires out never, but if you actually clear the cache, it still goes away. But yeah, it requires to persist this one forever. Create a date won't change. But what we can also do is put a user ID in here. So 381388, which is fine. And it's going to figure out that that's me and take me to the same page. What it does mean though, it's a separate cache call, so we store them both separately currently. So I've got one that's my user ID and then one that would be my name if it was in here. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So let's have a look at what can I show you about this. Some code. So yeah, this is in a module called the Drupalversary module. Nothing too crazy in here. Yeah, so this has got a root. We just specify the path, so there's u/the username. We've got another controller, so pretty much the other module that we had. This one is using the user controller. We're going to use the by username method. We've got to have the access content permission, and we also specify the username needs to be number of word characters. I think just has validation. So user controller by username. So we've got the same type of idea again. We've got the account retriever service. Pass the username in. There's some cool PHP 7 typings in here, which are pretty awesome. So we get the user from username or from the cache. Let's actually do something like that actually. By account retriever by username. So yeah, it's very similar. So we specify a key. So they username. If it's cached, get it out of the cache again. Otherwise, you do a user query, you specify the name, pass through the username that we've got, do the same execute, get content steps again, and then save it into the cache at the end. And then if you're doing it with a user ID, so essentially if the number if what's entered is numeric, we'll assume it's user ID, specify a slightly different key, and do essentially the same sort of steps, but specifying the user ID rather than the name in this case, because we're filtering on a different thing. So that's cool. Once you've got that, let's see, once you've got that, we want to pass it into, it's gone, there it is, pass it another service called the created date parser. So what we get from the API is just a timestamp. So it's timestamp of when your thing was, when your Drupalversary is, or when your created date was. So we're going to pass this through. Don't want to delete that, that's not a good idea. There we go. Pass it through a created date parser service. So let's have a look at that. Some more dependency injection stuff. So we're going to specify the date as a string because PHP 7. We're going to return back the same created date parser again. Just put the date as this created date property. Initially, the first version of this was, is it my Drupalversary? So I'd actually compare the current date to what your Drupalversary date was. That's really hard to test, because unless someone's date happens to be today, which the chances are they probably aren't for this many people in the room, that's quite hard to sort of show. So we changed it then to show more stuff, but we do still use that somewhere else. So in this case, we've got the created date, we're going to pass it through the date function to get the day and the month, and then likewise for the current date. And then so is the current date, the created date is the created month, the current month. We can get the date, so there is a Drupalversary date object, the value object that I've written. Drupalversary date, there it is. So using Drupal date time to get the current time, storing those, and then using set timestamp to set the created date on Drupal datetime. It's just a wrap around PHP's datetime class. And we're just going to store the day and the month as properties, and then we've got some getters to get this back out again when we need to. The current time, we can just use Drupal datetime with no arguments. It defaults to now, so we don't need to specify that. And we can then get the next year. So it's going to assume that it's going to be the current year. If your Drupalversary has already passed, then or it hasn't passed, we need to increase it by 1. And then we're going to say, obviously, your Drupalversary, your sign-up time probably is not going to be midnight, but what we can do is use modify to set it to be midnight here. So we're always going to get a timestamp of midnight of the day that you registered, just for sanitizing. We can count the number of days to go until your Drupalversary. So again, we can get the date from the calculated date, get the current date from now. Take minus the 2 from each other, so you get the number of seconds between the difference, and then divide it by the number of seconds and minutes in a day, and you get the number of days. Okay. Initially, you had to sort of round that value down to like 3.142 pi number of days, but because they're both being modified to be midnight, then we're going to get a nice round number anyway, so we don't need to do that, which was a nice side effect. And then likewise, we can get the number of years, just doing the same, essentially the same thing with years instead of dates, instead of months even. So it's pretty cool. Days to go. 16 account retriever. We've got our form. So this is very similar to the configuration form we saw in the last, in the other example. So because we implement this factory container interface, we get access to the service container where we get the form builder from. Injecting that here, and all this is going to do is build the form, and the form that we're going to build is the Drupalversary block form. So we'll put that up. So this extends form base, we specify, give it an ID, and then we use a very Drupal form API to build the form. So in case it's just the username and the submit button. And when we submit the form, we get the value out from the form state. We say, is it numeric? So if it's numeric, we'd assume it's a user ID. So I'm pretty sure that's how that works, and we can then use the account retrieval service to get it by the user ID. And if it doesn't, then we've already got the username here, so that's fine. And then we'll use the set redirect to then go to the Drupalversary username root, which is u/name, and we can pass through username as the array. So look at that. So. That's in here on the show. Username we've already seen. Okay, so yeah, by username, once we've got the user back out, we pass the date, and then we can return another render array. We can then say when is the person, like the name's Drupalversary. So if you go back here, you'll see this one's got my name in it because that's what I've specified. If we use Tim Millwood, for example, it's going to update it and say when it's Tim Millwood's birthday. Tim is on 11 years. Cool. In this case, we're using vSprintf just to pass the date through. This is Drupal's date format date function, which has been deprecated finally. Formatting the date that we get back to the date parser, and then pass it through the format plural method. So if you've got the number of years, we'll either say 1 year or number of years plural. And then also got the suffix, which is just going to say the number of days to go. This seemed like a really good way of just hacking it into Bartek for now. Just to use the suffix. This is just a suffix of this. It works. Don't judge me. Days to go. If it's 0, it says it's your Drupalversary, which is pretty awesome. If you like that sort of thing, let's just change that. Khaki. It's probably not going to have to update it now, aren't I? It's going to be a user ID. I can't think of a user ID. CHX. There we go. So now it says it's your Drupalversary. So it didn't work with me because I was already in the cache, so it didn't get as far as doing that. But yeah, it's Charlie's Drupalversary. Happy Drupalversary. And yeah, again, if it gets the number of days to go, and if it's 1, it says 1 day to go. Otherwise, number of days plural. So yeah, that's pretty cool. What else was I going to say about this? Drupalversaries, we've seen that all being there. Yeah, again, you can pretty much see that working. So yeah, I think this is quite a nice sort of entry point for this. I thought what might be quite cool if I do end up releasing it as a thing. I'm going to find the number of find people whose Drupalversary is today and like do a tweet or send them an email or something. That'd be pretty cool, but yeah, for the sake of demo. So there's nothing really this one for configuration unless it's log into. It's all sort of user facing and everything. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, that's. I think I've gone through everything that's shown here. Cache items, you've seen that. Yeah, I guess the only thing I haven't done yet is written any sort of tests for the Drupal layer. So all the tests are currently at the API level. This is me so far just like hacking on like an hour of my lunch hour here and there since 2 days ago because Tim got there. Yeah, so these are sort of minimum sort of approaches for now. I'm slowly sort of building them up to use, as you've seen, service classes, dependency injection, etc. The next step would be to add some actual sort of unit tests for the Drupal layer as well. Okay, couple of links. So Talks is where my Talks page is. We put the slides up for this. I've tried recording this. I'm not sure how well it's going to come out, but we'll see. The slides and potentially a video recording will be going up there. If I can do it, it'll be good for YouTube as well. The modules, the Drupalversary and the project stuff will probably go on GitHub afterwards as well as the actual API code. That, I think, again, is just sort of fairly minimal at this point. It's been what I need to do to get that stuff working. But if there's actually a couple of other little methods that I found that I could add on there, like get created date would have been pretty awesome for the Drupalversary stuff. So if anybody wants to do anything with that, again, there's more than happy to have pull requests and stuff accepted on that. What time are we doing? If we've got time, then we have questions. We have time for questions. Yeah, so probably a lot of stuff to take in there, especially if Drupal 8 is sort of quite new. I'm not going to be doing Drupal 8 pretty much. I really joined Microsoft back in March last year, so it's been over a year. So I've been pretty much doing Drupal 8 constantly for that time. I've done some Symfony before that as well, so a lot of these things to me are fairly sort of, been using this stuff for day in, day out for like the last 14 months or so as well, so I'm probably more comfortable with it than I was before that. But, okay, we've got tweet on afterwards as well. Yeah, this is the join in link. I'm always happy for feedback for things. I think I might actually turn it into a bit more of a longer sort of talk as well, so it'll be pretty cool. Yeah, thanks very much.